The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
That was Julian Assange at the very top, and of course that was Anton Karas, and not of course, I'm in New York City. This is my first Assange Countdown season 4 program in New York City since we left 4 months ago because of the pandemic. And here I am. I'm doing it outdoors today. It's a beautiful day. Great fall day, and I'm at Washington Square Park, and for a reason, in front of the statue of my hero, Giuseppe Garibaldi. Garibaldi, of course, liberated Italy. He brought it together, and most notably in 1860, when he liberated the kingdom of the two Sicilies, the kingdom of the two Naples, whatever, went into Sicily, then into Naples, and then he freed all of the opponents, all of the dissenters, and all of the journalists that were in San Stefano prison, jailed by King Francis, La Bamba, they called them. And he said to them when they got out, show me who your judges were. And there were judges who went along, just like today, they go along in this repressive trial, hearing, bogus charade, of an extradition. It's a show trial against Julian Assange, and the judge, Judge Vanessa Bates-Assar, whatever friggin' name is, I can't even pronounce it right now. She got me so upset. She is one of those that Garibaldi would have hunted down in 1860, who would have gone along to get along and been part of the ruling apparatus of repression. So, so we're here in front of, and for another reason, by the way. My special guest on this finale, this is episode 43, season 4, is someone who's been working with Assange as a media partner for 10 years. You know her, 11, 12 years, is Stefania Maurizi, absolutely the best. And she's been on the show many times, and she's the right person to close this season's programming on Assange. We'll be back in a month or two, but this is it. This is number 43. And so we're going to play a little bit of music, some partisan music from the, let's see, I guess from 1945. And then we'll be right back with the great Stefania Maurizi, one of the most intelligent and honest journalists around, and one with so much integrity. I love her. I just love her. And we'll be right back. Everybody loves her. We'll be right back with the great Stefania Maurizi. I'm here with Bianca, by the way, if you can't see her. Bye-bye.
Oh ragazza dalle guance di pesca, oh ragazza dalle guance d'aurora, io spero che a narrarti riesca la mia vita all'età che tu hai ora. Copri fuoco la truppa tedesca, la città dominava, siamo pronti, chi non vuole chinare la testa, con noi prenda la strada dei monti. Silenziosa sugli aghi di pino, su spinosi ricci di castagne, una squadra nel buio mattino discendeva l'oscura montagna. La speranza era nostra compagna, assaltar caposaldi nemici, conquistandoci l'armi in battaglia, scalzi e lasci.
Okay, this is Randy Critico live on the fly here on WBAI 99.5 FM. We continue our Assange Countdown to Freedom programming, which actually started on this station way back in April of 2017 with Julian Assange and with John Pilger. The following week, at the behest of Julian Assange, I interviewed this great journalist who was working back then at La Repubblica. And that, of course, is Stefania Maurizi. She has been interviewed by the Assange Countdown series a number of times. And she's been a partner with Julian Assange and Wikileaks in terms of publications for over 10 years. And we just finished up the second phase of the trial, as you know, or the hearing, the extradition hearing at the Old Bailey. And Stefania wasn't there for that, but she was there for the first one. I know she's watching it very closely. I was with her back in February. And so she joins us now. Stefania Maurizi is an award-winning journalist, used to be with El Espresso, then she was with La Repubblica, and now she's with, and I hope I pronounced this right, and that is Il Fatto Quotidiano.
Yes.
Am I right, Stefania?
Yes, it's Il Fatto. Hi, Randy. Thank you for this conversation. And yes, of course, I was watching the hearing. I was just cut out for 2 weeks because I was a witness of fact. And the U.S. Council asked for not being allowed to watch because I was a witness of fact. But as soon as my evidence was read before the court, I was readmitted and I was able to follow the hearing closely.
So you actually, Stefania, there was testimony by you that was read into the testimony at the Old Bailey?
Yes, exactly. Initially, I was supposed to fly there, but you know that during the course of the hearing, the council, the U.S. Council and the Julian Assange defense were discussing who was supposed to be questioned, who was supposed to be cross-examined. And apparently the U.S. Council said that he agreed with the JA defense on my statement. So there was no need for cross-examination, basically.
I see. And can you just give us the nature of for those, this is a U.S. audience right now, and it was not covered in the U.S. at all anywhere except for here on WBAI, and that was not that much, but as much as we possibly could. Could you just give us the nature of the relevancy of your testimony?
Yes, basically, you have to realize that I have been there from the very beginning. I started working on the documents even before collateral murder. So I have witnessed many things as a journalist working on these documents, because the first time I published a document in partnership with Wikileaks was in August 2009. And at that time, Wikileaks had not published collateral murder yet. So few knew about Wikileaks and its publications. So I have witnessed many things. I have witnessed how they published what happened before collateral murder. I witnessed what happened when they published the Afghan war logs, the cables, the Guantanamo files, and so on. So I was able to tell the judge what I witnessed as a journalist who has worked on all these documents. Basically, we were working on these documents very carefully. We were, for the first time, Randy, we were supposed to use such strict procedures. So it was absolutely false that WikiLeaks was dumping these files without any redaction, without any uh, kind of work, without any security measure. We had the most strict security procedure I have ever seen in my career as a journalist. And I can tell you, even more strict than those procedures used by colleagues who works on very serious mafia investigations and mafia investigation involving very dangerous criminals. In my case, WikiLeaks asked me, in my case, but even in other cases, of course, even other journalists who work on the documents about Afghanistan, Iraq cables, we were requested to use encryption systematically. So we were never allowed to discuss our documents on the phone, on the emails. So every time I was proposing an investigation or a publication based on these documents, I was supposed to go to my editors, wherever they were, travel there, meet the editors, talk in person, no electronic devices allowed. I was supposed to use their gap computers, not usual, not normal computers. I was supposed never to leave my computers and my gap computers unattended, and this was very stressful, Randy, because you can imagine how stressful it is to keep your computers always under control, never left unattended. It was so stressful. It is so stressful that at a certain point, I consider buying a special recipients for classified information, which is very expensive, something like 8,000 euros for each recipient, because it was so stressful never to keep the computers unattended. So these were very strict procedures. And it was the first time that we journalists were requested such strict procedures. So whenever you hear that Julian Assange put people at risk because he was distributing, he was disseminating these documents in a reckless way, without being responsible, without redacting these documents, it is completely false, because we were requested very, very strict procedures, as I have never seen in my life as a reporter, as an investigative journalist. And we were supposed to work on redaction. I worked on the cables for 9 months, for more than a year, but initially 9 months. And I remember I was contacted with WikiLeaks around the clock to pass them.
Stefania, can you back up? Tell us, for those who don't know, about the cables and when the cables came out and how far-reaching they were.
So first of all, you have to realize that it was September 2010. I flew to Berlin to meet Julian Assange. He was flying from Stockholm, where he had been under investigation, and he had asked to the Swedish prosecutor to be allowed to fly to Berlin to meet me and the other journalists. And we met the 27th, 28th of September 2010. And since then, I never have met Julian Assange as a free man again. It was 10 years ago. So few months after, we work on the cables. WikiLeaks had initially started publishing these cables with the so-called top 5: Guardian, New York Times, El País, Le Monde, and Der Spiegel. And as far as I know, these five partners didn't want other partners to join, but Julian Assange did want to have more media partners in order to have many stories, to have the cables properly searched. So in January 2010, I flew to, in 2011, because the first publication was the 28th of November 2010, with the Guardian, Spiegel, and so on. Then in January 2011, I flew to the UK, where I got access to the cables, and I got access to the Vatican and Italy cables initially. Then I was allowed to search the full set of cables, but initially just the Italian and the Vatican files. So I was provided this encrypted file, and Julian did not provide me the password initially because he wanted me to traveling safely. So as soon as I arrived in Rome, he provided the WikiLeaks team provided me the password to access these documents, and I was supposed to work in very strict, very strict conditions. And as I told you, I was never supposed to use the phone to talk to my editors about the stories. I was never supposed to use emails. I was just supposed to use encrypted computers, encrypted communications, talk to my editors in person in a special room with no electronic devices and so on. And I was supposed to read the cables and look for any sensitive information, any sensitive informant or source, and to consider whether that name should be redacted. So it was a very proper, serious journalistic work. It was definitely not dumping the stuff on the internet. It was definitely not publishing stuff putting lives at risk. And so it was completely different from what we are told that Julian Assange did, basically. This went ahead for something like 9 months. In August 2011, basically something happened. Basically, a German weekly revealed that the encrypted file containing the full set of cables was available online, but it was encrypted, so no one had any concern. But the problem was that some months before, in February 2011, The Guardian, two journalists working for The Guardian, two prominent journalists working for The Guardian, had published the password on their books. So it was not difficult to connect the dots, that basically you had an encrypted file with the full set of cables, and you had the password out there published in this book. So everyone at that point understood that it was possible to get access to the cables and to decrypt it. And this is what Cryptome did. The US website specialized in leaks and sensitive material created by John Young, Cryptome, basically published the full set of unredacted cables in the 1st of September 2011. And at that point, the 2nd of September 2011, WikiLeaks published the full set of documents because they had already been published by Cryptome. I know for sure what happened because I was in Hellingham Hall. I was in this in this country house, big country house, where Julian was under arrest. When it came out the news that basically the Freitag, this German weekly, had revealed that the encrypted file was publicly available. And unfortunately, the password was also publicly available because it had been published by the two Guardian journalists. So I remember that day, I was at Hellingham Mall in the rural Britain, a wonderful place where Julian Assange was under house arrest. And he was deeply troubled by the idea that the cables were basically available online with the password out there. And I witnessed the call, the famous call to the State Department, where Julian Assange was trying to alert the State Department, and Sarah Harrison from Wikileaks was trying to call the State Department to alert them about the imminent release of these cables because the password had been published. So, I mean,
Wait a second. You were there when he made that call? I know that famous call.
Yeah.
You actually witnessed that.
Yeah, I witnessed those calls. I remember that Laura Poitras was there and cooked for us. She cooked salmon for us because I remained for dinner that night and then went back to London and back to Italy. So it was the end of August. And, few days later, the 1st of September, Krypton published the first version of the full set of cables, unredacted cables. And the 2nd of September, at that point, WikiLeaks released the full set of cables because they had already been published by the Krypton. So it was never, it was never ever what Julian Assange wanted. He definitely didn't want to publish everything unredacted. We had worked for 9 months on redactions, and we were passing redactions to WikiLeaks all the time to make sure that the documents were published responsibly with any name redacted if it was necessary, because most of them were not necessary, Randy. Most of them were just embarrassing information. Most of them were about sources providing confidential information to the US diplomacy when they were not supposed to do that. Most of them were pressure on Italian Vatican officials in order to get some bad things. I will tell you about the pressure to have basically the Italian authorities not forwarding the arrest warrants for the CIA agents involved in the extraordinary rendition of the Milan cleric Abu Omar. I'm sure you heard about this case because it's very famous.
Yes. You wrote about that case, right?
I wrote about the case only thanks to the WikiLeaks cables, because you have to realize that Italy is the only country which basically was able to nail the 26 US national, most of them CIA agents, responsible for the extraordinary rendition of Abu Omar. You have to realize that Abu Omar was basically kidnapped in Milan, the 17th of February 2003, in the middle of the day, as in a child, in the Pinochet child, basically. He was kidnapped. And our prosecutors, one of the most prominent prosecutors we have in Italy, his name is Armando Spataro, and another brilliant prosecutor, Pomarici, were immediately able to start their investigation and to reconstruct the names of the CIA, to pinpoint any CIA involved in this case, and they were able to charge them and to put them under trial and to get a final conviction for them. Italy was the only country to have a final conviction and up to the Supreme Court for these CIA agents. But you have to realize that none of them spent a single day in prison. Why? Because 6 justice ministers refused to forward the arrest warrant to the US. And if you look at if you just have this story and look at it, it would have been possible to guess that probably the US had put pressure on the Italian politicians, but it would have been impossible for me to provide evidence of such pressure.
Wow.
Whereas,
Stefania, that it's just amazing when you bring that up, that none of these people spent any time in prison. When you look
absolutely,
at that, when you look at the fact that, all of these crimes that were committed, that Wikileaks has exposed over the last 10 years, 11 years, and you're witnessing this trial, because we got to wrap up here in a few minutes and go into our second half, but looking at what happened there, and then what we just witnessed in the second phase of the trial, how does that make you feel? What's your emotion when you see Julian in this glass box going through this torture for the past couple of years inside Belmourish and then inside the glass box?
well, Randy, you have to realize I'm really upset about this case because I have been there from the very beginning, publishing the very same documents, getting the scoops, publishing this crucial information like the like the cables on US pressures on Italian politicians, justice minister, undersecretaries to have the US to have the arrest warrant not getting forwarded to the US. So I publish all this crucial information and I never ever had any problem. No one ever questioned me, no one ever put me in prison. And I see Julian Assange behind this glass wall, and he has never known freedom again since September 2010 when we met for the last time in Berlin. And I cannot accept this. I'm really upset. I cannot accept that I'm free. I'm able to have a life and to enjoy life and to work and study and go to work and so on. And he has never known freedom again. So I'm really upset, Randy, about this situation. I'm really upset for him as a human being because I know that he's a good guy. Julian Assange is not an easy human being. I know he's a complicated human being, but he's a nice human being at the same time. He's a good guy. I know this because I have worked on with these documents for more than a decade, so I know what kind of human being he is. So I'm upset for him as a human being. I think this is completely unacceptable. It is absolutely unacceptable that the 26 CIA agents, which basically kidnapped this guy in Milan and torture him and made torture possible, all sorts of torture possible, never went in prison, not even for a day, and they enjoyed presidential pardon and so on, whereas Julian Assange has never known freedom again. And I'm also really upset that we are not free to expose these serious human rights violation without having the journalists who expose them in prison. I cannot accept this for our democracies, Randy. I want to be part of this change. I want to be part of a team of professionals, journalists, activists, artists, and lawyers, and so on, who basically unleash a change. And the change
We're going to
is
talk about that, Stefania, about all of that on the other side. We're going to take a quick break here at WBAI 99.5 FM in New York City. We're talking with Stefania Maurizi. We'll be right back after a quick break.
La mattina, appena alzata, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao alla mattina, appena alzata, in risaia mi tocca andare, e fra gli insetti zanzare. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 e fra gli insetti e le zanzare un duro lavoro mi tocca fare. Oh mamma mia, oh che tormento. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 oh, mamma mia, oh che tormento.
All right, that was Bella Ciao, one of the great partisan songs, anti-fascist songs from World War II Italy. We are continuing our conversation with Stefania Maurizi. I'm Randy Credico. Randy Credico, live on the fly, Assange Countdown to Freedom, WBAI, 99.5 FM in New York City, collaborating here. Stefania Maurizi from my favorite named organization, media-wise now, and that is Il Fatto. Il Fatto. How do I pronounce it again? You see that? I love the name of this media organization. Can you just pronounce it for our audience out there?
Sure, it is Il Fatto Quotidiano.
Yes, and you go online, on Twitter, you can find it there, spelled out just like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Stefania Maurizi is S. Maurizi, at S. Maurizi for Twitter. She is, she's like the expert here. You know, my favorite journalists I really go to all the time are Craig Murray, who's really a writer, historian, but he's been a great journalist covering the events at the Old Bailey, John Pilger, of course, and you. But of all the people, you've been the longest, working journalist, working as a media partner with Julian Assange. And you were talking about that, being a media partner. How did you get chosen, by the way? Because I know he's very meticulous and very careful. What drove him to you, or did you go to him?
Yes,
Stefania?
basically, Randy, I basically put this in my written statement. So basically, you have to realize that I'm a mathematician. So before going to journalism, I got a degree in mathematics. And one of my, to graduate mathematics, my university, you were supposed to submit a thesis and a dissertation. And one of my dissertations was in cryptography. At that time, when I graduated in maths, my knowledge of this, of cryptography was just theoretical. But I understood cryptography because I had studied that discipline at the university. So when I started working as a journalist back in 2008, one of my sources stopped talking to me because she was convinced that we were under interception, illegal interceptions. So at that point, I decided that I needed a better source protection. I needed to protect my communications with sources. And for me, it was natural to think about encryption because I had studied cryptography at the university as a mathematician. So it was one of my sources inside the field of cryptography, which who put Wikileaks on my radar screen. Because at that time, back in 2008, very, very few use encryption. It was even less user-friendly than in these days. So this source of mine, the field of cryptography, told me, you should have a look on that bunch of lunatics. And the lunatics was a nice way to refer to WikiLeaks. Basically, my source had a look at their work, and he was impressed. And he said, look, these guys are pioneering encryption for journalism, for protecting sources. So maybe you should contact them and you should establish a content and see how they work with encryption to protect sources. And this is what they did. Basically, in 2008, I contacted WikiLeaks. They were pioneering the use of encryption to protect sources. And there was no other media organization, not the New York Times or the Washington Post. This big newspaper would take years before they use encryption. WikiLeaks was a real pioneer in using encryption. So I contacted WikiLeaks. I started establishing this contact with WikiLeaks. And back in 2009, when they had a document about Italy and they needed some help to verify whether it was genuine or whether it was not genuine, they asked me for help. They called me in the middle of the night. And I remember my telephone was ringing and I couldn't wake up. And I finally woke up and they said, we are WikiLeaks. And I could barely understand what was going on because it was in the middle of the night. And they said, you have an hour. You should go to your computer and download this file. You have an hour before you download, because after an hour we will remove it from the internet because someone can intercept it. And they said, we would like to hear from you about whether this document is genuine, whether it's relevant. We think it is, but we want to hear from you. So I went to my computer, I downloaded the file, I listened. It was an audio file about a scandal, like the garbage scandal in Naples, when this garbage was basically, the city of Naples was drawing in garbage basically. And this file was very interesting because it mentioned an alleged role by the Italian intelligence in this garbage crisis in Naples. And I verified that file. I helped WikiLeaks verifying that file. They had done their own checks. I did my checks. And we finally published in August 2009. That was the first time I was a media partner for WikiLeaks. So back in 2007, when they had published Collateral Murder and the most important documents, for them it was natural to contact, to try to establish a new partnership. And in fact, I started publishing basically the Afghan war logs, the cables, and so on. And this is how it all started, basically.
Can I ask you a question? Were you getting pressure? I know you got pressure back in February from La Repubblica for covering the trial and for your reports. But were you getting pressure back then when you were doing stories on Cablegate and these other, the war logs and all of that from Espresso or from La Repubblica?
I can tell you that at the beginning, they were very collaborative because at that time, everyone loved WikiLeaks. Everyone was very pro WikiLeaks. So everyone was jumping the bandwagon and so on. But later on, pressures or unhappiness started, and there was a different atmosphere as WikiLeaks started publishing these documents. You have to realize that this kind of work doesn't gain you any powerful friend. Quite the opposite. The US is very powerful and their influence reach every corner around the world. So there are not so many editors happy to work on these documents, because at the end of the day, it doesn't gain you powerful friend. You don't have the US ambassador smiling at you and inviting you to have a drink or to attend a ceremony and so on. So it has been difficult at the end, Randy. It has been really difficult.
it's very easy to corrupt editors or managing editors, I suppose, for powerful figures to do that. Because once you get into the hands, into that atmosphere, going to cocktail parties or going to the ambassador's home, it has a real corrupting influence. Is that what you've witnessed over the years as an investigative journalist?
Well, it's something different than corruption. This is a difficult job. This is a difficult profession where you have few opportunities, especially in these days where, I mean, newspapers are shutting down, are going bankrupt, and so on. So there are few positions, there are few opportunities. So people don't want to touch controversial things. People don't want to touch things which are troubling, and they don't want to touch things that could be problematic with when it comes to very powerful entities like the State Department, the Pentagon, the White House, and so on. So it's something much more subtle than corruption, I would say. It's about avoiding trouble because it's very tough to be a journalist in these days. So it's very 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 complicated to be able to publish these documents.
Well, Stefania, obviously you were having an impact because as being a media partner and getting these stories out over the years, over the last 10, 11 years, and then reporting from Belmarsh and all of this in total, it ends up that you were so effective that the CIA, did a major operation, and you were one of their main targets as a journalist. And how much of that came out in the trial? I didn't see that much on it, but first of all, talk about what they did to you. We've talked about this before. Max Blumenthal talked about it on my show. You were on it, but just give us a little bit of the background of what they did to you, for those who have not heard this.
I suppose you are referring to the spying activities inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London when Julian was confined there. Basically, during that time, Julian Assange remained confined in the embassy, which means from the 19th of June 2012 to the 11th of April 2019. For 7 years, basically. I visited Julian Assange many, many times. And from the very beginning, at the beginning, it was quite friendly atmosphere. It was bad because, of course, Julian was inside the building, which was really small, and it was really bad to witness how he was confined inside such building with not fresh air, no sunlight, and so on. But at the same time, the atmosphere at the beginning was rather friendly. It was like visiting a friend and talking without any concern. But at the end, around 2007, 2008, it was really bad, Randy. It was like to visit a prisoner inside the prison. So one of the last time I visited him, as soon as I took my phones out, I realized that the security guards were watching at me in real time, and they entered the room and basically seized my phones and everything. So we were watched in real time. It was not like there were cameras, CCTV cameras. They were watching us in real time. So it was really disturbing. And when I saw the picture of what they had done to my electronic devices, or how they had unscrewed my phones, and they took pictures of everything, all my devices, all my USB sticks, power banks, and whatever, chargers, and whatever. I was really upset because I could imagine we were watched but I could not imagine to that extent. They unscrew my phones. They were recording my conversation with Julian Assange. I was able to get some of access to some of the videos, and I was really upset. And you have to realize that they did so in especially in one occasion. It was 1 month after I had discovered, thanks to my Freedom of Information Act litigation, that the UK authorities had destroyed crucial emails about the Julian Assange case, even if the case was still ongoing and even if the case was still was highly controversial. And I had discovered this, and 1 month later, I was subjected to this targeting, to these spying activities. And I want to tell you that I have decided to sue this company, and I have decided to file a criminal complaint because I
Well,
want.
wait a second, Stefania. There were two. I was there too. It was September of 2017 where the hearing was postponed in the lower tier with Estelle Dahan and your attorney and Jennifer Robinson, and then it resumed. I think in November of
Yeah,
the same year. And they took some photos of me too. Was it that period of time that
yeah,
they intensified it? Because you
yeah.
had this great suit against them, which I understand you still do. But we'll talk about that in a minute, about your suit against your FOIA suit against CP SUK. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Just want to get those dates
Yes,
right. That was
basically,
September and November 2017.
yeah,
Okay.
yes, basically in November 2017, I discovered that the UK authorities at the Crown Prosecution Service had destroyed these crucial emails about the Julian Assange case. And let's not forget that the Crown Prosecution Service is the very same agency in charge of this extradition case to the US. So it's not an irrelevant agency, an obscure agency. It's the very same agency in charge of this extradition to the US. And thanks to my Freedom of Information litigation, it was possible to discover that they had destroyed these crucial documents without providing any explanation. Basically, 3 years later, after I discovered this, they still haven't provided any explanation why they destroyed the documents, how they destroyed the documents, what the documents contained. They have no, they say they have no idea what the documents contain, which is unbelievable. This happened in November 2007, and in December 2017, sorry. This happened, I discovered in November 2017, and a month later, in December 2017, I was targeted heavily by these security guards inside the embassy, and my phones were unscrewed, and they took pictures of my phone codes, and I was explained that the reason why they take pictures of these codes is because they might use for hacking activities. So I was really upset to realize how heavily I was targeted inside the embassy. And I absolutely want to file a criminal complaint and discover what happened. I want to discover whether they were able to access my information and data I had in the USB sticks. I had encrypted all this information because we never I traveled. I never traveled without encrypting my data because I'm aware that these data might be stolen, or I might be arrested or whatever. I might be stopped and so on. So I always encrypt my data whenever I travel, whenever I go around. And I want to discover whether they were able to decrypt it, whether they were able to access this important information which I had with me. Because as you know, we journalists have to travel all around the world, bringing our phones, our USB sticks, and all we can do is to encrypt them. There is nothing we can do, you know.
Wow, that really is scary. You know, look, I'm a comedian and a radio host, but just seeing a couple of pictures of me inside an embassy, and one of the times I'm sleeping basically, and I'm having a cup of coffee, but they really like went full steam ahead with you, and then they also went after a few other journalists, and the recent story was none of them cared. The American journalists didn't even care. They didn't do anything about it. Do you have anybody else joining you? Any
No,
journalists
no.
in this suit?
I ask, I asked the Washington Post journalist Ellen Nakashima, who was targeted as well. I asked other journalists in US, but none of them replied at all. You know. So
I didn't understand that. What do you think their reasoning is for not? This is just part of doing business, and everybody does it. I mean, this is a major breach, particularly as it's been exposed that it was done by the CIA, funding by this character Sheldon Adelson, and you have this guy at UC Global who totally made $1 zillion in the process and violated everybody's privacy rights.
Oh, well, first of all, Randy, we have to realize that it's correct to say that we don't have final evidence that it was CIA. We do have a lot of information thanks to two protected witnesses. So we hope to have final evidence of CIA involvement because these two protected witnesses provide a lot of factual information. And we are very lucky that there is a major investigation in Spain by serious people, a serious judge at the Audiencia Nacional, which is the Spanish investigative body in charge of very serious crime like terrorism, drugs, trafficking, and so on. So we are very lucky that we have two protected witnesses and we have a very serious judge investigating this case with the power of a judge, which means he can arrest, he can put people under interception, he can gather evidence using very effective judicial tools. So we are very lucky because at the end, probably we will be able to get evidence of US involvement in this case. We have the witnesses saying so, you know?
Well, okay, so when I say CIA did it, I'm only assuming because I can imagine how upset they are with Julian, not with just the war logs and the torture and everything else,
Absolutely.
but with the Vault 7, which you and I have talked about. That didn't come up at the trial much. Can you tell us the significance of Vault 7 and why that would incense the brass at the CIA?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that I was the only media partner for Vault 7. Der Spiegel joined at the last minute, but I worked on the files before weeks and weeks before they came out. So I was actually a media partner because media partner means that you have access to the documents before publication, actually. So I was a media partner for that release, and it was very, I would say, I would use for the first time scary. It was scary because I was alone. No one was there. It was not like working at the cables where you had dozens of media partners and we were talking, exchanging information. I could not talk to anyone. I could not discuss anything because those were CIA secrets. It was a nightmare, you know, it was very, very difficult to work on those files and to try to verify some of those files with some trusted expert that I could contact without telling them be careful. Don't go around telling that I work on these documents, you know. So it was very difficult. Why these documents were important? They were important because for the first time, they provided an insight on the CIA cyber weapons. So we had an understanding of what kind of tools they have, how they might use them, and how they work. You know, it was for the first time to get factual information on these cyber weapons, on how they can penetrate computers, how they can hack, how they can cover their tracks, and so on. So these are important files for the first time to acquire solid and factual information. At the same time, these documents are not among the documents for which Julian Assange is currently basically have been charged by the US Department of Justice. And you have to realize that the only documents for which he was charged basically were the Afghan war logs, the Iraq war logs, the cables, the Guantanamo detainees. And if you listen to what the US lawyers say, they claim that they are not putting Julian, didn't charge Julian for doing journalism. They did charge him only for publishing unredacted documents which put people at risk. However, if you look at the indictment, that's not true. If you look at the indictment, you discover, and you read it very carefully, you discover that they absolutely put journalism under trial, because they basically charge Julian Assange for obtaining and receiving classified information, for disclosing classified information. This is absolutely what we journalists are supposed to do: discovering secrets, information revealing war crimes, revealing 50,000 deaths never accounted before in Iraq, revealing death squads in Afghanistan, revealing how the US put pressure on Italian politicians to stop the extradition of CIA agents responsible for the Abu Omar rendition, or pressure to boycott, to bypass the International Criminal Court. And 10 years later, we see the US war against the International Criminal Court just for investigating the US war crimes in Afghanistan. So, I mean, what the US is doing is upsetting, is horrible. They absolutely are threatening, they are damaging journalism, because receiving and obtaining classified information is what we journalists are supposed to do. We do this all the time in order to expose.
Stefani, if what you're saying is correct, that what they are saying, the U.S. attorneys there, and we know that the Crown Prosecutor Services are doing their bidding, but that anyone that has classified information in the future is subjected to Espionage Act violations?
Of course it is. Of course, if they can assert their jurisdiction on foreign publisher revealing secret classified information, revealing war crimes, and they can assert jurisdiction and extradite him to the US and put him in prison for life. Of course, we all journalists will be at risk anytime. They will do the same for an Italian journalist, for a French journalist, for a German journalist, there's no doubt. And you know, I have colleagues telling me, look, you know that Italy will never extradite you to the US. And they say, and I tell them, look, maybe Italy won't extradite me if the US asks my extradition, as is doing with Julian Assange. But maybe one day I will travel around the world, and at that point, the US will be hit by an arrest warrant for extradition purposes by the US. And at that point, I will find myself in a foreign jurisdiction hit by an arrest warrant for extradition purposes. And I will become a target. I will become just a pawn in, in an international chess play, you know?
It's
So
just amazing that you've published everything that they've published. So obviously, I mean, more than any other journalist, you and the papers and the media outlets that you work for have published just exactly what WikiLeaks has. So I could see that happening to you. And another, because today is the 7th of October, which is exactly 4 years ago today, that the Podesta emails were put out there by WikiLeaks just hours after the so-called Hollywood Access tape. And there's been so much BS about it. The stories, they continue to abound that somehow WikiLeaks worked with Roger Stone or someone within the Trump administration to get those things out that particular day. You are an eyewitness on the real story. So why don't you just like lay it out for those who want to know the truth about October 7th, 2016?
first of all, Randy, I want to clarify that I don't know the truth. I know what I have seen and heard from my side, from my point of view, because I was a media partner there. First of all, you have to realize that no one wanted to work on these files because no one wanted to upset the Clintons, so no one wanted to publish these documents. And of course, there had been all this campaign that these documents were coming from Russia, so there might be a serious legal risk, and no one wanted to work on these files. So I found myself alone working on these files, and I know, yes?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought you wanted to interrupt me and ask something. So I find myself alone working on these documents. And at a certain point, they notified me that they would publish the 7th of October. They would publish the 7th of October, and they alerted me that they would publish the 7th the day before. And I asked, what time do you want to start publishing? Because I was not publishing my own story the 7th of October. I would publish later on my story. Because WikiLeaks had decided to release these documents not all at once, but rather in many different releases in order to allow people to get a better understanding and access to these documents. And they had decided to do so because before, in July, when they had released the first DNC emails, they just published all at once, and they were criticized for doing so. So this time they wanted to do the right thing. They wanted to release documents slowly so that people could be allowed to read the documents properly, to search the documents properly. So they alerted me the day before, and they said they would publish the 7th of October. And I asked what time. I think we publish very late in the morning, or maybe afternoon, and so on. And at the end, they published, I think, 32 minutes after the famous Access Hollywood tape, which was about Donald Trump making very rude comments on women. And, it was not that they published at the last minute. They had planned the release at least the day before, because I was alerted the day before. And so it was not a last minute publication as most of the people sustain. It was definitely not. I
That
cannot say, Randy, I cannot say what happened behind the scene. I can only say I'm 100% honest about this.
Right. No, I
I
know
never,
that, Stefania. Stefania, I totally appreciate that. And I'm sorry, I was incorrect. You're right. I don't know what happened that day as well. You know what I mean? But what I do know is that on the 6th, someone knew that they were publishing them on the 7th, and that someone was you, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was alerted the day before, and I knew that they were publishing. I knew that it was supposed to be very late in the morning or afternoon, and at the end they published, I think, 32 minutes after the Access Hollywood, but it was definitely not a last minute decision. I want to tell you that basically they even tried to get documents about Trump. Specifically, they were looking for the tax declarations, and they were trying to get these documents. I remember that very clearly. I remember that they wanted to have a release about Trump, and they tried to get this kind of information, but apparently they did not get anything relevant. I remember they get some files about Trump, and they asked the media partners to have a look on these files, but we realized that these files were already public, so there was no reason to publish these documents about Trump because they were publicly available. So I can tell you that they were looking even for materials about Trump. This is what I know. And this is, you have to realize that no one ever contacted me, neither from the Russiagate investigation. No journalist ever tried to get this kind of information from me, which is quite unbelievable, because if you have a car accident with hundreds of victims and there is a witness, you go there and ask the witness, what have you seen? What did you witness? But no one ever asked me for anything, it's unbelievable.
It's amazing that they not only did not ask you, but they never went to that embassy and interviewed Julian Assange, which I find to
Absolutely.
be amazing. But certainly they should have interviewed you. We only have a few minutes left here. I want to ask you, first of all, the consequence of the Podesta emails is that you got a lot of liberals in this country who got very angry with Julian Assange. So you have conservatives don't like him because of the war logs and the Cablegate, and then you have liberals who are upset thinking that he consorted with Trump. So it's a two-headed monster in this country. He's not a well-loved figure nationally, and I don't even know what the question is on that, but you understand that, right? That he's not that
Absolutely.
well loved.
Absolutely. It's not, I have seen that they basically are hated by, whenever you have a publication, they have an enemy. So it's one publication, one enemy, or maybe 10 enemies for each publication. And I have seen from the very beginning a real demonization campaign especially against Julian in person, which basically was denied any empathy. And that's why the US see him as an easy target, It's very clear what they are doing. They want to crush him for publishing these state secrets, revealing extremely serious abuses. And they know that they can do it because he enjoys little empathy. And so once they have done it, they have a precedent, and they will do it with any journalist they want to crush about revealing abuses by the CIA, the Pentagon, the NSA. It's very serious. They always start with with people who are not perfect, who maybe are a bit controversial or maybe are enjoy little empathy. It's like with the terrorists. They basically tell you, oh, this is a devil, this is a monster, this is the worst of the worst. And you, at that point, you are willing to say, well, maybe this is the worst of the worst. So we have to put him in Guantanamo and do all sorts of evil things. But then they will do the same with others. They are just using what they tell you. They are controversial, maybe dangerous people in some cases, but then these kind of abuses, these kind of special powers, this kind of lawfare get used against all of us. So they are using Julian Assange to crush journalism, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to understand this. And I am sad to see the New York Times, the Guardian so silent. The Guardian, I would say the Washington Post, the US media are completely silent about this. I'm really upset. I'm really upset, first of all, because the New York Times got these scoops. And so, I mean, that's completely unethical to stay silent, first of all. And then I'm really upset because clearly the target goes far beyond Julian Assange. The target is journalism, journalists, all of us.
Right. I must tell you that it's really driven me crazy the last 4 years because I see what's going on. I came to it late in 2016 when I first interviewed him, but already this year I've done 43 of these shows because it's driving me crazy that this guy is being persecuted, being made a martyr of, and it's such a bad precedent that it's an obligation, I think, of anyone that has any awareness like me to put whatever you can out there and circle the wagon instead of the firing squad around Julian Assange. I want to get your final thoughts because originally this is the 43rd, our fourth season of this special series, Assange Countdown to Freedom. We will do number 5 maybe in January, but this is it. You were the right person to do this with, Stefania. You've been there for a long period of time. I just want to get your final thoughts on the proceedings at the Old Bailey, what it implies, and what kind of forecast do you have? What's in store for Julian?
Well, to be honest, I'm not optimistic, Randy, because I have seen that in the UK, you always have this impression of fair play, where everything seems okay, very fair, and so on. But at the end, when it comes to Julian Assange, everything is very weird, absolutely weird. I have seen this with the Swedish case, which was completely highly anomalous. And Julian was left in limbo for 10 years without the prosecutors basically charging him or dropping the investigation once and for all. A highly anomalous situation and investigation. I have seen this with my freedom of information litigation, which is a nightmare. I have spent 5 years trying getting these documents. I mean, you have to realize that in just 3 years, the Washington Post was able to get the Afghan papers. I mean, 2,000 documents secret documents about the US war in Afghanistan, and they just got 3 years of Freedom of Information Act litigation. And I have spent 5 years and thousands of euros in US, UK, Sweden, Australia, and 5 years later, fighting with 7 lawyers representing me, I get very, very little. And as soon as I started getting very important information like the UK pressures on Swedish prosecutors, the UK agency, Crown Prosecution Service, destroying the documents, the UK Crown Prosecution Service putting pressures on the Swedish prosecutors not to drop the investigation back in 2013. As soon as I started getting these documents, they stopped all sorts of cooperation with me, started me denying me documents and rejecting my FOIAs. And there is even an unprecedented development. I cannot discuss this for legal reason, but soon you will hear what is going on in my UK case. Unprecedented things are happening, never happened before, you know? So whenever I look at this case, I realize that Julian Assange has the full force of US and many other intelligence and the security complex against him, and they absolutely want to crush him, and they will stop at nothing. I have this precise feeling he won't go well. I'm very, very concerned.
Wow. Well, I must say that you really are an unbelievable. You got more stick-to-itiveness than Sisyphus did going up that hill. And one of these days you're going to get over it, and hopefully Julian Assange will get over it and actually realize some justice. You are an amazing journalist. I wish there were more like you. I want to thank you for all the work you've done over the years, and for all of the time that you've afforded yourself for this particular program. You've been a big benefit. You've been an inspiration, and continue the great work, Stefania.
Randy, I want to tell a final thing, and the thing is, this is a collective work. There is no way to say Julian Assange and to avoid the US crushing him and journalism all at once, unless there is a public outrage and people reacting and taking to the street and writing and reporting about it. So this is not about me or about you or about any other, but it is all about us. Unless we work and unless we expose what is happening, these things won't change it, and it will end up very badly. So this is a collective work.
I agree with that totally. It is a collective work. And the thing is that you've inspired so many people. They get the information. I see a lot of these activists on the street, whether it be in London, Sydney, Toronto, Milan. There are people out there, Scotland, in Berlin. There are activists out there, and more need to get out there. I know that, but it is growing, and it's a collective, a collective work of art is what it is. I mean, we really got to get out there, and it's to galvanize as many people to be outraged and pour out on the streets in support of Julian Assange.
Exactly.
And so everybody has to make that contribution. I do it in my own little way. You've done it for a long period of time. You've inspired me, and that's what I'm driving at. Is someone that I know you put yourself in harm's way. I know that you've done that, and I know it's part of your lineage. I know your family background, fighting the fascists and all of that. So you carry on that torch, and you really are a remarkable individual. And I hope you inspire more to do the same.
Thank you.
All right, Stefania Maurizi, thank you once again, and we'll be right back with some closing remarks right after this.
Thanks to you, Randy. Thank you.
Oh Badoglio, Pietro Badoglio, ingrassato dal fascio Littorio, col tuo degno compare Vittorio, c'hai già rotto abbastanza i coglion. tlas mai dit parei, tlas mai fai parei, tlas mai dit, tlas mai fai, tlas mai dit parei, tlas mai di lu sì sì, tlas mai fa lu no no, tutto questo salvarti non può. Ti ricordi quando eri fascista e facevi il saluto romano e dal duce stringevi la mano? Sei davvero un gran bel porcaccion. Ti ricordi l'impresa d'Etiopia e il ducato di Addis Abeba? Meritavi di prender la meba ed invece facevi milion. Ti ricordi la guerra di Francia che l'Italia copriva d'infamia, ma tu intanto prendevi la mancia e col duce facevi ispezion. Ti ricordi la guerra di Grecia coi soldati mandati al macello ed allora per farti più bello rassegnavi le tue dimissioni. A Grazzano giocavi alle bocce mentre in Russia crepavan gli alpini, ma che importa, ci sono i quattrini e si aspetta la buona occasione. L'occasione è arrivata alla fine.
What a great way to close this season's Assange Countdown to Freedom. This is season 4. We're going to take a little hiatus and come back with season 5 sooner rather than later, we hope. Please support our programming by going to Assange Countdown to Freedom.com, and you'll see support. We just need to cover our bills, man. We're not in the Assange business to, make a lot of money. We're just trying to maintain the very small costs that we have. All right. So that being said, thank you all. This has been really a tremendous season. I want to thank all of the guests, and there's a lot of them, for being on. I want to thank Kelly Lane, who's been the engineer and has also been the editor for all the work that she's done. I want to thank Margaret Radner-Kunstler. I want to thank Emily Kunstler and Sarah Kunstler, maintaining the website and helping me prepare these shows. Let's see if you can see here. I want to thank Bianca. I guess you could see Bianca right there. I don't know, but she's been very helpful. And that's just about it. We're going to go out with something special, and we'll see you. I think we'll do the Matteotti tune. This is Matteotti, one of the great Italian socialist leaders who was murdered by Mussolini in 1924. All right, we're going to go out with Matteotti. Thank you, everybody, and see you soon.
Forse ad ascoltarmi state, canto il delitto di quei galeotti che con gran rabbia vollero trucidare il deputato Giacomo Matteotti. Erano tanti, Viola, Rossi e Tumì, il capo della banda Benito Mussolini.